Russia heard that it's time to party, and the party's in the Red Sea, right? They've sent naval ships. They've sent warships to the Red Sea, likely in an effort to deter Houthi activity. The Houthis have been attacking trade. Now they're focusing on U.S.-Israel trade, or trade that has to do with the U.S. and Israel. We're not going to discuss their reasons for doing that. That's not the purpose of this video, okay? The purpose of this video is to take a look at the Russian Navy. The Russian economy is closely tied to oil, so they want to have a presence where oil could be attacked. And maritime trade is specifically a way that we use to courier a significant amount of oil. It is in Russia's interest to make sure that that trade specifically is stable. Okay, a lot of the information that I'm getting for this video is from the World Directory of Modern Military Warships. Okay, it's a really phenomenal website. Got lots of colors, lots of pictures, lots of infographics, and it really breaks things down in a way that makes a lot of sense to people that aren't necessarily experts or fluent in naval analysis. There's a lot that goes into a country's navy. There's almost an infinite number of factors. And I think doing an honest review of Russia's navy is pertinent right now. Russia is known to be exceptional at information operations, propaganda, stuff like that. They had the whole world convinced, in my opinion, that their military was their ground military was far more effective than they have shown to be in Ukraine. Now, we can war game it. There's a million different factors that go into any military conflict. So again, that's not the purpose of this video, but the fact remains that their estimates of how long that conflict would take have been far surpassed. So what makes up Russia's Navy, and how does it compare to the US Navy? Okay, in the reading that I've done in the World Directory of Modern Military Warships, they classify what people normally would say as hulls as fleet units. And Russia has 265 fleet units to the US's 243. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into how you would maybe grade a country's navy. And Russia does have a strong navy. Nobody is saying, I don't think anybody's implying that Russia doesn't have a very powerful navy. To say that they don't would be an understatement and dishonest analysis, in my opinion. Okay, but let's look at some of the different factors that make up Russia's navy, some of the different ships. Russia has a significant number of corvettes. Russia has estimates put somewhere between 60 and 70 corvettes. This is not the Corvette that old dudes are buying to bag their second wife. This is not the Corvette that your private probably went out and bought at 17% interest after basic training. It's got 275,000 miles and it's probably on fire right now. Now, corvettes are a relatively small naval warship. Russia's corvettes specifically, under NATO classifications, would be closer to frigates, but I digress. Russia has a significant number of these, though. The US has very few, less than 10, I think less than 5. I've seen estimates ranging from 2 to 9. Corvettes make up roughly 31% of Russia's navy, and submarines make up approximately 21% of it. Now, these submarines are largely diesel-powered, whereas the US predominantly uses nuclear-powered submarines, and they are aging, right? They're getting old. The median age of a US hull is approximately 24 years old. The age of equipment, the age of technology, the age of capabilities, not always the number one factor in how you assess something. The F-22 is a pretty old platform and it is extremely effective. Okay, but again, we're looking at all the factors here to get an honest assessment, an honest review of the Russian Navy. Globally, Russia is ranked number 3 in naval power. The US is ranked number 1. They have approximately 21 amphibious assault units. They have 1 carrier, and they have somewhere around 58 submarines. Aircraft carriers cannot be understated when you're talking about naval power. They are almost inarguably the linchpin of power projection globally. Being able to have an aircraft carrier, logistically, resupply it, allow it to stay where it needs to stay, to utilize it, to get your aircraft where they need to go is monumental in power projection. Aircraft carriers can do significant damage to even large countries and can absolutely level small ones. Not the aircraft carrier itself, obviously. You need flyboys like Tom Cruise operating the platforms on them. I'm going to pull up two infographics here that kind of show the composition of the Russian Navy as a percentage of different platforms in the US Navy. And you can see there are some differences. You can see the Russian Navy has a significant number of corvettes, again, in comparison to US submarines. And the submarines that Russia does have are fairly aged. They're fairly dated. But what is the Russian Navy capable of doing? What does all this information mean? The Russian Navy is fully capable of patrolling pretty much wherever they want to globally, and that is a significant capability to have. They can go and protect their interests on the waters almost anywhere in the world, and they have been focusing on their Pacific Asia centered fleet for some time now. It has become a growing point of interest for the Russian Navy, for the Russian government, and for good reason. Significant maritime trade goes through the Pacific Asia region, ocean. I think I just had a stroke. It's my assessment that in naval combat, Russia would probably fare relatively poorly, especially in comparison to the US, but against most nations with modern navies. Russia's assets, their capabilities, their platforms are aging. They're getting old. A lot of them are undergoing refit. Their sole aircraft carrier is actually currently undergoing refit. They don't bring to the table what a lot of other modern navies do. They don't bring the firepower, and they're not capable in the same way of logistically supplying these units. Now, sustainment logistics is inarguably probably the most important aspect of warfare. There have been many times in U.S. history when the U.S. lost battles solely because we could not sustain ourselves. The very first battle of the Revolutionary War is one example of that, and it's an example I use quite often because it's such a phenomenal example of this logistics-like shortfall. In the very first battle of the Revolutionary War, the colonials were doing really well against the British, and they literally ran out of bullets. More than likely, they would have won that battle had they been able to sustain themselves. And sustaining yourself for patrolling operations around the world to, foster stability of trade routes is a completely different beast than sustaining yourself for naval warfare. In addition to that, you knock out Russia's one aircraft carrier, and they don't have anything to come after it. The U.S. has 11. Theoretically, if the U.S. lost an aircraft carrier, we could replace it relatively quickly, but it would be a significant emotional event. You do not touch the United States of America's boats. You don't do it. Don't touch my boats. Russia's Navy is relatively balanced, right? They, on paper, look really good. They look like they can do anything that a modern Navy would need to do. Maybe they can't do it as well due to aging equipment, aging platforms, but they can hold their own. If naval warfare were to break out, it is my assessment that Russia would be able to hold its own for a period of time, but it would quickly be overwhelmed, even just by the U.S., if not the U.S. and its allies. It cannot be understated, though, that, assessments should be taken for basically the value that you paid for them. It's always when the first shot happens that we find out what a military is made of, what specific military forces are capable of. And there are so many factors when it comes to any form of military combat that it's hard to say how things would play out. There's almost an infinite number of factors when it comes to any form of warfare, and naval warfare is no different. It's an incredibly complex subject. As always, guys, I appreciate you watching. Thank you very much. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. All right, guys, this is my very first time doing a video kind of like this. I've kind of compared specific platforms in some videos, but now I'm going to compare an entire military force, which is the naval forces of Russia, to the naval forces of the US. Kind of give them a little bit of a review. If you guys like this, I like doing it. I've been an intelligence professional for 12 years. Please let me know what you want me to take a look at next. Please let me know what you liked about it, didn't like about it, everything. I want your honest criticism and your feedback in the comments. I really, really value when you guys comment. I do so much as a content creator at this point that it's really difficult to respond to a lot of comments, but I do read them, and I take your ideas, I take your criticism, I take your thoughts into account when I'm making content. It really, really helps me as a creator, so please don't stop.